This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Monday morning. It's February 5th. I wrote January 5th in my notes. That's not right. We have the Wolves 21-point win over the Houston Rockets to get to on today's show. I thought it was an important bounce back performance for the Wolves after on Friday they lost to Orlando kind of the same way they've lost maybe 10 of their 15 games with poor late game execution. I've got Jace Frederick here from the Pioneer Press. Jace, I wouldn't say this was like a vintage pre-Christmas Wolves game, but I think it was like in that direction. How much did this remind you of the Wolves back at the beginning of the season, where we were just kind of like, they play a team like Houston and you would go into the game and be like, I expect them to win, and they would win, and they would kind of do their Wolvesy things. Like, how much did this feel like maybe early December to you?
I think a lot. I think for me, I think I went into that game being like, I think Minnesota matches up really well with Houston. Like, I would have probably chalked up like a similar roadmap to what happened last night as the actual, what played out. But just like in general, it was one of those games, and they played these earlier in the year too, where like it's a 4-point game at halftime. And honestly, it's like, I would walk away from that with like a tight game being like, I would be really stunned if Minnesota doesn't win this game. And it's because they're playing the type of defense that we've seen. We definitely saw it earlier in the year, and we often saw it at Target Center specifically. The type of defense where it's like the other team can't score, like not even close to consistently or reliably enough. Nothing they're doing offensively is repeatable. So it's just like this isn't going to work over the course of 48 minutes for Houston. And sure enough, that's what played out. Like, and they only had 44 points at halftime, but it was still like I don't even know if they could do that again. Everything is just so hard and difficult, and like tough shots, and there's just no nothing they can go to, and they're like, well, they can keep going to this, Şengün, whatever. Like, there was nothing that they could hang their hat on offensively, because Minnesota really did kind of shut everything down that Houston would want to go to, and that is to me what was so similar to like a lot of the games we saw at home, specifically pre-Christmas, where like teams were just like hopes and prayers on offense.
Yeah, it's the two things I think you could point to that are most early season Wolves are the dominant defense and Ant in the third quarter kind of putting the game away. And those things have been substantially less frequent. Not completely. I mean, obviously there's been great moments from the defense or quarters here and there, and Ant's had his little boomlets from time to time. But I was thinking about that. I was like, what makes this? Was it more the defense, or is like what is the identity of a really good, convincing Wolves win? Is it that kind of Ant stomps it out, or is it the defense? And I think it's the defense, right? Like that's because that can sustain, right? Like that can be through all four quarters. And not that Ant can't contribute in all four quarters, but it's hard to be on fire, right, for like every single one of your stints out there. I thought that was important. But we can focus on the defense first. I was looking it up this morning. That was their best defensive rating game of the season. Even surprised me. I always thought Portland was just so when they beat Portland at home, that was just so bad by Portland. But yeah, they really shut Houston down last night, and we were kind of asking Finch about it after the game, and as the defensive questions normally do, they go to like, oh, what was like Gobert's impact at the rim, which is obvious. But Finch immediately pointed out, he goes, I want to give credit to Jaden McDaniels too. And he just completely shut off Jalen Green from the beginning of the game. And I think that's what, when we talk about this best version of the Wolves defense, it's that there's more going on than just Rudy, right? Like, I think about the very beginning of the season, I thought Carl and Nas were really good defensively. That's kind of like, ebbs and flows. Jaden kind of ebbs and flows defensively over the course of the season. Nikhil's been, really, really consistent there. But I thought it was interesting that Finch pointed to Jaden, and that probably is a good reminder that this defense is not just about Rudy at the rim. It's arguably just as much about controlling the point of attack and the way the Wolves can do that, not just with McDaniels, not just with Alexander Walker, but with Edwards and Conley and Anderson. Like that to me is just as important to this defense as Rudy at the rim is.
Well, it's just like when when you've got Rudy at the rim, you've got a baseline, right? It's like,
Yeah.
well, we won't get absolutely destroyed here. But it's like, if you want to be elite, if you want to be like almost unscorable on, if you want it to be like, I don't know how Houston's going to get their next bucket,
Mhm.
like it's got to start on the perimeter. Like otherwise teams will find a way to like, they might get at least like 18 footers, shots are on the three, driving kicks, whatever. Like, and
Mhm.
you can start generating some good offense and feeling yourself and getting into a little bit of a run. But like when you suffocate on the perimeter, when you make getting by you really hard, and then when you do that really hard thing, now you're too Rudy and you have no momentum and no speed or anything, because it was all physical up to that point, and you had to like trudge your way to the rim. Now you have no chance, and so it really does like start with those perimeter guys, and like that's just what elevates it. Like Rudy gives you a baseline of, I don't know, let's just say like 110 defensive rating or something, and then it's the perimeter defense that bumps it up to 105, 104, like those numbers that are just truly elite in today's NBA, like
Right.
almost unthinkable in today's NBA. So I agree with that. I think like the post game comments, that's what makes Chris Finch such a good coach, is like he even said it himself. Like one thing that definitely came out of that Saturday thing was that they challenged Jaden McDaniels to get back to being a really good on-ball defender, like being elite. Like if you've been watching games and thinking like, Jaden, not quite the same, the coaches challenged him to get back to that. And then when he does it on Sunday, then yeah, you go out of your way to be like, and Jaden was great.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. You know, like it's just the affirmation of, we see you. We
Mhm.
see that you did what we asked and we appreciate it.
Yeah, that's probably the way to talk about all of this, right? If there was a turning back into the team that they were earlier in the season, like something was the impetus for that change, right? And obviously you can point to the loss against Orlando, and that's a loss they didn't feel good about. They lost it in the same way as they had lost a lot of their games this season. So what came out of Saturday, and in theory, right, if the Wolves go 12-1 over the next 13 games, like, or they're go undefeated into the All-Star break, we're going to point to the film session on Saturday, February 3rd that happened there. But they were all talking about it. Like they talked about it after practice when we talked to Kyle Anderson and Nas, and they said it was like a full, like they watched the entire fourth quarter of that Orlando game, not just clips, and guys just stood up and spoke about getting back to being, the team they wanted to be, or they want to be. And some guys talked about this film session again after the game last night too. Ant said, I think Corliss Williamson, one of the assistant coaches, Ant said, I think Corliss was the MVP of that film session for sure. Kat said about the film session, we just wanted to reestablish who we were, taking any miscommunications that we have on defense and offense out, and just sitting there as a family and having those tough discussions. Conley said, Mike Conley, I think the biggest thing, honestly, regardless of what was said, it was who all spoke. So it seemed like, we're not going to get carried away about one win over the Houston Rockets as signaling that this team has changed and completely got back onto the path of being a contender. But they did need to kind of be shaken and reminded that it's easy, particularly in this Western Conference. Like if you mess around for a while, you can fall back to 3, 4, whatever. And I think Finch, the coaches and the leaders on the team know that, and they try to kind of nip that in the bud this weekend. And at least for Sunday, it showed up. That's probably worth us mentioning here.
I think this has been talked. Like, isn't Corliss Williamson like one thing? I think that he has a big role in is transition. Like they've really like
Transition
kept him
defense
a
and
transition
rebounding.
defense. Yeah, right. And that was an area where they got crushed by Orlando. And
Yeah.
it's and so I'm not surprised at all that he was one of the first people to
Sure.
kind of take the reins of the meeting and be like, because that is, if you're going to get chewed out, it should be for transition defense. Like above anything else, it's like you just didn't do it.
Well, it's the biggest change from last season to this season.
Right.
Like
more consistently doing it.
I mean, and numbers wise, it's nuts to me. It's like
Right.
the Wolves, when it was the Cat and Gobert lineup, I've said this a bunch of times, but when it was the Cat and Gobert lineups, it was like them and Utah. They were like got ran on as much as anyone. You were like, oh, the team with 3 centers, the team with 2 centers got ran all the time. Like, shocker. And now you look at it this season, actually, Houston allows the least transition opportunities, and the Wolves are always there, like 2 or 3 in least transition opportunities against them, which kind of blows my mind. That is a huge shift. It's also like, I feel like I would try and run a lot on the
We've s-
Timberwolves if I was playing against them. But
And the last couple have, right? Like Orlando definitely
Yeah.
did. Orlando was
Mhm.
very intentional. And even Houston for sure in the first half. I don't think there were that many opportunities in the second half,
Sure.
but like you would just see like Thompson or whoever would just like Thompson would go 1-on-2.
Yeah,
And it's
right,
not like
right.
he's some elite offensive player, but it was clearly like go. And it was
Yeah.
like you just go in at the rim. It's like
Yeah.
whatever I do here, a turnover or a miss, especially for Houston, who just doesn't have the shot making to play against Minnesota. Like whatever I get out of this, free throw, turnover, whatever, is better than what we're gonna get in the half.
Exactly.
Like that was literally their minds. Like Dylan Brooks 1-on-3, yeah, I got it. You know,
Uh-huh.
like it was literally like just go. And so I am surprised we don't see more, especially more bad teams. Like now, I'm not saying Houston's
Right.
bad. They're like 3 games under 500. They're probably not going to make the play-in, but they're okay. You know, like I'm surprised more teams of that caliber aren't like, here is our only chance to win tonight. Like
Right.
especially in Minnesota, let's just go. But I don't think we've seen a lot of teams take that mentality where at the beginning of last season, I think it was because like the new thing was like, this is Minnesota. Oh yeah, they are playing two
Too big.
centers.
That's
Let's just run. You know, like it's almost like it becomes now that's just Minnesota's thing. You don't think about it anymore. You're not just like,
right.
should we just run on these guys? You're just game planning and whatnot. Where it just seemed more obvious to me at the beginning of last season, and certainly Minnesota was more susceptible to getting smoked by that last season as well.
Yeah. Well, and Corliss Williamson was a new
Yes,
addition
off-season
to the staff.
addition this year. Yeah,
Like they created an extra position. He didn't
Right.
replace anyone.
Correct.
And it was for this reason. So to point to that, how the rebounding has gotten better and the transition defense has gotten better, that makes sense that Corliss Williamson, has played a role in that, and then played according to Ant, was the MVP of that film session yesterday. So, I mean, this is what good teams do, right? Like when you get a little askew, you find a way to kind of get yourself back to being like the team, the team that you can be. And I think they weren't that against Orlando. Like they were the team that was kind of like, let's mess around and see if we can get this done. I think Orlando did, a handful of good things against the Wolves. I liked their second half adjustments. I actually asked Mitch about that on Saturday. I was like, was part of that like Orlando, just the way in which they played? He was like, oh, I get what you're saying. Like they went big, but what Finch said to me, he goes, they had 28 points in the fourth quarter and 17 of them were in transition or on the offensive glass. He goes, so I can't really like give that much credit. He goes, it was us, kind of not doing the things that they, when they're playing their best basketball, that they do. I want to talk about that Orlando game a little bit. Like I'm not trying to totally brush over the.
It was more interesting. I know the Houston one,
Yeah.
like it was good, but I mean, I can honestly say I think even like if Minnesota isn't playing at their best, just the way they match up, and Houston doesn't have like the creation and the scorers. Like Jalen Green's like an okay basketball player. Like he's not like a high end player in any stretch. I think Minnesota beat Houston 90 times out of 100.
Yeah, I wrote if they get them in the playoffs, that's a sweep.
It's a sweep for sure. And I said the same thing, and I had to immediately follow it up, and I was like, Houston's not. I mean, I would be very surprised if Houston made it to the play-in. Like they're currently out of it. I don't think they're gonna get back into it. Certainly, somebody can get hurt. Houston can just randomly get hot, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, they didn't get the 10, and then they'd have to win 2 games to get to Minnesota. Like, but yeah, Minnesota just matches up so well with Houston. It's like 95 and what in the first meeting, and however many points Houston.
Yeah, I think it was 122 to 95 in the first meeting. And then it was 111 to 90 yesterday.
Yes, I would think it'd be 4 games, and maybe one was competitive in a playoff series between those two teams. So, like, it's like, Minnesota did great. They really did. They played well. I don't want to take it away from them, but I just find those less interesting because going into the game, I would be like, I think Minnesota's going to win this by double digits at least, because the NBA, you just can't state it enough. Like, matchups really matter.
Right.
It makes some things where it's like this team does not have a chance to beat this one, or this team does, and they can be similar talent levels. Like team B and team C can be similar talent levels, but team B has a chance to beat team A, and team C does not because of the way they match up.
Right. Let's talk about the Orlando game. Because I don't want to cut it up with a break in the middle of it. Let me get this break in here. Today's show is brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company, another one of our local sponsors here that we hope that you consider if you are considering like a home improvement renovation this winter. They are offering a deal that is 30% off on bathroom renovations right now. If you call now, and they can do those renovations within one day, a full bathroom renovation in one day. The number for that is 844-270-7180. And then also they have a buy 2 windows, get 2 windows free deal if that's something that you are going to be looking to do this winter as well. To don't let the windows get drafty. If these are things that you are considering and you're going to go to someone to do a bathroom renovation or get new windows, we just ask that you consider Your Home Improvement Company. They obviously support this show, and so we're hoping that that's something that you all do to be able to support them as well. Again, that's Your Home Improvement Company. You can go to yhic.com or 844-270-7180. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better.
Can you imagine standing on a roof and inserting a window by yourself? Like that thing looks
dude,
heavy as all get out. And you're just like, you're trying to jam it in there. Yeah, I would do like the one step back, and because it's too heavy for me, and fall off the thing. Like
I did a landscaping job,
not a
summer.
DIY job. Yeah.
And I suck at everything. But I had this landscaping gig, and I was just like, all those jobs that like required any sort of like scary stuff like that, where I'm like, man, if I just step wrong here, I'm gonna fall off the whatever.
Right.
So I was just like, no, guys, I'll just move the rocks. Like the rocks in the driveway that we have to move back to the backyard. That was a terrible idea too, because you're literally just shoveling rocks and putting them.
That's where like at the end of those weeks, you're like, I can't move.
No, dead.
Especially like the first couple weeks of it.
And I was like, 20.
You just get used to it. Yeah.
I'm like, right now, if I had to scoop one wheelbarrow full of rocks, I'm out for the week. That's it. I
remember when I would do stuff like that. I wore this is great for basketball podcasts, but like sitting on a roof, putting in leaf guard, and I'm just wearing like old basketball shoes that had no grip. Like I just like, and I just remember sitting on the roof and like sitting down, and my shoes had no traction on them. I just started sliding down the roof. I got all the way to the gutters, and finally my feet went into the gutters, and I stopped. I thought I was gonna die. It was only like 15 feet. I wasn't gonna die, but I thought I was just going off the roof. And that's when I realized I don't want to do this.
This is why you're not hiring me and Jace to do a home improvement project for you.
I definitely recommend the people in the video doing those jobs.
Your Home Improvement Company.
Yes, Your Home Improvement Company.
Yes.
It's not my home improvement company.
I thought the Orlando game was interesting. And the reason is, and it's part of, I don't know if it was 3-4 weeks ago, you and I did a pod about like which teams in the West would present a difficult matchup for the Wolves, or teams we felt confident in them beating. And one we were both kind of like on the fence on, but really recognized it was an area in which the Wolves were susceptible, was the Pelicans. Mm-hmm. And our rationale for that is, one, they're big, right? They kind of match the Wolves' physicality, which takes that away as an advantage. And then like a strong playmaking, scoring power forward like Zion presents, a difficult matchup for the Wolves, because your power forward typically is Karl Anthony Towns or Nasri, and you typically don't want to have either of those two on the opposing team's best, offensive player. So there aren't really other teams in the West that are like that, but I thought Orlando played a lot like New Orleans to me, and particularly in the second half, once they went super big and they brought Jonathan Isaac in for Markelle Fultz. So it was Wendell Carter Jr., Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, and Jalen Suggs was the 5, which gives you the rare lineup the Wolves are going up against that's bigger than they are. And I found that interesting because Rudy was guarding Fultz, which allows him to do, his lurk off the shooter thing. And that really worked. That works broadly all season. They loved it. They did that against Giddey, right, in the Thunder game. But you take Fultz out
against the Rockets.
Yes, exactly. And it again worked great. The interesting part of it was, now with Fultz out, I thought the biggest change was how it allowed the Magic to match up differently. Rudy had 17 points in the first half of that Magic game, and it was because he was being guarded by Banchero, and Carter was on Cat. And what they did because they're worried about guarding Cat. By bringing Jonathan Isaac into the game, Isaac guarded Cat, shut Cat down. Wendell Carter was able to move to Gobert. Gobert only has 2 points in the second half, after having 17 in the first half. And then Banchero moves on to McDaniels or whatever. And I agree, like what Finch said, 17 of the 28 points, they were self-inflicted. They were, allowing transition opportunities, allowing offensive rebounds and all of that. And if you watch it back, like you go, yep, that was an error. That was a mistake. And it really reminds me, though, of kind of the discussion we were having about Finch with the 4 non-shooter lineups or whatever, where, like, yes, those lineups messed it up, and it wasn't like the spacing was what caused it in the specific possession, but it's almost kind of like an energy to me about when you don't have those advantages there for you that you once had. Like, yes, it might not be directly correlatable, but it's this overall feel where you've lost some of your advantage. You lost the Gobert on Fultz advantage. You lost the Towns posting up advantage, those sort of things. So if you can't even go to them, and that if you're Anthony Edwards or Mike Conley or whatever, then maybe you are going to look the other direction and not even look that way and have a turnover or allow an offensive rebound and that sort of thing. I kind of disagree with Finch and with a lot of people out of that game that was just the Wolves shooting themselves in the foot. I've seen the Wolves shoot themselves in the foot in the fourth quarters 10 times this season. They shot themselves in the foot again in that Orlando game, but it felt different and felt to me like it was a product of the bigger players on the court that Orlando had, and why I think that is relevant as it ties to the Pelicans thing, where I'm a little worried about this team when teams go big against them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect Finch to be like, yeah, well, dude, I don't know. They went big, and we just got nothing for big. Like, you're right, Dane. Well, we are so screwed. If somebody else goes big.
No, but dude, he did it. He didn't.
I know. I wasn't
getting at, and he directly went in another direction. I think I know Finch well enough where he goes.
Yeah.
I was
kidding. I was kidding. And I do think part of it also is like, Finch had just spent a 60-minute film session talking about the things they did wrong in the fourth quarter. So like, he's just so in that headspace that it's like, what did they do? I don't know. We should have done this and this and this. Like literally all he's been talking about and focused on. And that's the only direction he's even looking at that point. Mm-hmm. I think you're right in that, like, it's what makes the Wolves so good is like when the opponent does not have an advantage, like an individual advantage to create, to put the defense like, mm-hmm. to get you out of your like rotations and whatnot, like break down the defense, get 2 on the ball, like, and now everybody's playing 1-on-1 in a matchup where they do not have an advantage. Like that is literally what the situation the Wolves put so many opponents in every night. Mm-hmm. And it's like, now what? And you see how hard scoring becomes. And that's what it was for Minnesota there as well. And you just end up in a lot of different isolation situations, bad shots, whatever. And then eventually turnovers because you're like, there's just nothing there. There's not space there. And like that can come down to like the Wolves can play a better offense for sure. But like you have to be great offensively when you mm-hmm. do not have like a matchup advantage that gets a possession started, that creates mm-hmm. like, it's easy to get downhill. It's easy to get 2 on the ball, whatever. Life gets way harder. We've just seen Minnesota do that time and time again to teams. And it's like, I don't know what you're going to do. And that is what it looked like, frankly, for Minnesota in that game. Like
just being big, right?
Yeah,
like, I
mean, where do we go? Where is our like easy offense to at least get a good look here? Oh, we don't have it. Like it's hard for everybody. It would be, and no offense looks good in those situations because it does turn into like stagnant isolation basketball because like, you don't know where else to go. It's when Minnesota's so used to like having something. Mm-hmm. Like Carl with a guy who can't quite stay in front of him or down low in the post, whatever, and just being able to turn the corner on somebody, like
even Rudy like duck in on a small, like,
yep. It's something.
No, I think it was they were so like, if you, I don't know if anybody listening to this, like if you go back and watch all of the fourth quarter, possessions or whatever, if you can, but just go watch the Ant ones, which, we've talked a lot about Ant turnovers in fourth quarters. That's been an issue, but like to me they were swarming him more, or it just feels like more of a swarm when, I mean, that Magic lineup is 4 6'10" guys out there. Like, I'm not totally giving Ant a pass, but that's a lot harder to do the job that Ant has when it's 4 6'10" guys out on the floor and kind of compacting into the paint and being told to show help against you there. So I don't know. I really, as odd as it sounds, the Wolves, the biggest team in the league, like I think if I'm a team that can go big against them, I'm trying to lean into that. And I think that's a good way to muck up the Wolves offense a little bit, is just with kind of excess size. And with Orlando, it wasn't like painfully big or anything. They could play that way. But yeah.
Yeah, they're still playing good players. You know, it's not like they're just
Yeah.
like, let's go 3 centers. You
Uh-huh.
know, like it's
Yeah.
functional, like it's functional players, and they still like, yeah, there's technically a small forward, technically a power forward, like just as big as they can possibly go at every position, and it worked out great. It's like,
It's like if the Wolves were doing this against the Wolves, it would be playing the Rudy, Cat, and Nas lineup all at the same time.
yeah, right,
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right,
this
sure,
lineup, you don't really use that often, but you could go to it because those are all good players and they're bigger. Like, teams that have that in their bag, I would use it. I would use that against the Wolves. And maybe Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee is the next team coming up who can kind of do some of this against the Wolves. It's the same thing of presenting the really difficult matchup at the 4. Who's going to guard Giannis? That sort of thing. I'm interested for that Milwaukee game for that reason, because this has been on my mind since a month ago when we had this conversation. Sorry, I cut you off.
no, I'm just interested to watch Malik Beasley guard Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Milwaukee, that's who they got.
Yep.
Like, it's gonna be Malik Beasley on him. Like,
they're Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah,
Alexander Milwaukee really is.
If you're like, wait, Malik Beasley sucked at defense when he was here, it's like, no, he still does. That they don't have anybody. This is why they give up 130 points. Not the coach. They don't have a single perimeter defender. They don't have one. But that is what it is. But like, I think it's interesting because like we always talked about going small, and that was the idea of how do you best generate offense against Minnesota.
Yes.
But the answer might be like, we're just not going to score that many points, but we think if we go this way, they won't score that many points either. You know, and we'll just get into like a brawl, you know, and it's first to 100, especially in the playoffs or whatever. Like, we'll take our chances, and that makes some sense, especially like. Now, certain teams, they're either going to have to lean one way or the other, and they don't have an option to toggle. But you do see like paths for like, if you're a big team, it's like, let's just go big and just try to not let them score. And if you're small, then that's when you're like, we got to space them out, and they're going to have advantages. Cat, Rudy, whatever, even Ant, if we don't have a rim protector out there, he feasts on that. Like, he's probably the player who takes the most advantage of opposing small ball lineups. And we'll just try to outscore them. But like, just to wrap up my one thought about like when you don't have an advantage, how hard it is. It's like, think about when the opponent doesn't have an advantage. Like last night, Houston, no offensive player had an advantage, and it's how hard it is for them to score. And then you think like, man, the Wolves have done a bad job defending New Orleans. It's like Zion has an advantage over everybody on the Wolves roster. So like, offense is so much easier when you have a player that either themselves can score or then like has to be compensated for so that the rest of the defensive integrity breaks down. Like that is basically, especially in the NBA, that is basketball like 101.
It's really, I've grown a greater appreciation this year for like the concept of advantage basketball.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I like kind of knew what that was. You know, you're like, oh, it's creating advantages, but whatever. But you see it so much on a Rudy Gobert team, right?
Yep.
On both sides of the ball. He obviously can take away advantages that teams have of, you know, a really quick guard getting downhill. Well, Rudy's there. Like, that advantage can be largely taken away, and he creates them on offense. Like, first thing I put down in my notes yesterday at the game was the Wolves' best offense so often has Gobert involved in it, which I mean, and I'm not even trying to be the like, oh, like, y'all don't watch the Wolves. Like, you know,
you don't understand his value.
I didn't know that either. Like, when you're watching the Gobert stuff night after night and you're seeing the advantages he creates for Ant and specifically Mike Conley, like, you go, oh yeah, it's like this starting point where now you have 2-on-1 here, or you have Ant going against a big or whatever. Like, Rudy creates these advantages all over the place. And while individually, you know, he's not a smooth offensive player, the offense as a whole runs smooth because of the advantages he creates. And that's why this team is becoming an advantage basketball team, and they're playing their best offense. Like, and maybe we can get back into that third quarter of the Houston game where you're putting Ant in advantageous situations by being off ball. Mike Conley was initiating a lot of the offense, and then it finds its way to Ant coming off of an off ball screen or something like that, and he's going decisively, which is key for Ant. If you see an advantage, go right away, and be able to do it. And I found the third quarter really encouraging in the Wolves playing advantageous third quarter offensive basketball. What stood out to you about that third quarter last night, where the Wolves basically was a 4-point game at halftime and got up to 20 about halfway through the third quarter there? Obviously, it's a lot of Ant shot making, but what did you like about that?
Yeah, just to tie on your other point quick.
Yeah,
Mike Conley said last night that Rudy is the best player on the team of like using his body to create attention and open stuff up for other people offensively. And that's you would never think that, but literally like his best at creating for everybody else,
right?
Which is like its own form of playmaking that just won't show up on any stat sheet. I think for me, the third quarter was like it was Ant going into Inferno mode, but it started in like with good offense, like it started with him playing off the ball and just getting easy looks, like the ball coming back around to him, like second side, easy attacks, layups, those types of things. And then it's just like he sees the ball going a couple of times, and like he said, he's like, I make one and you know what's going to happen or whatever. And I hate that mentality, but it's still like it is like you get 3 easy looks or whatever. Now you are more likely to make the harder ones. Like that's just true, and it's so much better going that route than you trying to get yourself going by being like, I haven't done anything for a while here. Let me dribble up and attack a stacked defense, or let me pull from 3 here and just hope I can get myself going. Like, lets the offense get him going and then goes from there. Like, and some of those shots at the end of that run were like, ooh, I don't know. And then they go in and it's like, okay, cool. But I just think even those are so much more likely to go down when you've gotten going via easy looks, and easy looks come when sometimes you're off the ball and you're getting like so many more like positions where it's like, yeah, you are going to score here 9 times out of 10.
I thought it was a really interesting like combination in the third quarter. Like it started with Mike. It was the most Mike played point guard in a long time. I thought the whole game, and the most Ant then played.
Which Finch said was going to happen.
Guard. He did. He said it. That came out in the film session or whatever.
Said it after the Orlando game too. I think like Mike's gonna have the ball.
Yeah, Mike's gonna have the ball more. Yeah. But it was, to me, it was like the perfect way to kind of go about it. Mike was creating it or finding Ant in advantageous situations, and the first couple buckets were that way, right? It's playing through Mike into Ant, go bucket, and that happened 2 or 3 times, and then it went into running the offense through Ant, which is a less efficient thing that the Wolves do. But when Ant is already rolling, it becomes the most efficient thing that the Wolves do. So I really liked how that kind of flowed through the course of the third quarter. And I liked that Ant, once it was in the him part of it, the kind of the second half of the third quarter, it was more of an intention to take threes. He got the step back going a little bit more so than it was stepping in to take the mid-range looks, which we think the mid-range is, I'm not doing the no mid-range thing. It's a sometimes thing. And Rudy, when he was talking to us after the game, he was like, I love when Ant is playing that way and from beyond the 3-point arc, because he goes, I think he shoots a better clip from beyond the 3-point arc than from the mid-range, and one's worth 3 and one's worth 2. And I looked it up this morning. Ant shooting 40% from 3 and 39% from mid-range. Yeah. 39% from mid-range, 40% from 3 on the season. He shot 293 threes and 366 mid-range shots. The mid-range has to be part of the diet.
Yeah.
But I think to Rudy's point and to the third quarter's point as a whole, the 3-point one should be more than the mid-range one, right? And that's where the Wolves are playing their best offense. I feel like when Ant has hit a couple and then the barrage of threes come, you're like, okay, this one might be over.
Yeah, it's like if the diet is a heavy dose of mid-range, then the offense isn't working. And there are different situations. Like if you are facing like a hardcore drop coverage team, maybe you are just and you're knocking them down, like maybe you are taking a bunch of 16-footers that are coming pretty naturally off the bounce, like great looks. But yeah, and I was just like we talk about shot selection a lot. Like we are not anti-riding heaters.
No, yeah.
All about it. Like, yeah, you got to cook and go ahead, like take a couple of heat checks, whatever. Like you then just know, like when the heat check, when the heater's over, like adjust accordingly, be smart about it, but like ride it. Yeah, absolutely. Like this team has won a number of games because of ant heaters, like, and that won't go away. And they become even more necessary in the playoffs when offense is hard. It's just about like, it's really just, I think a big key is allowing the heater to start organically, like easy buckets and being like, all right, now they're going down versus like, versus sometimes what looks like an intention of we are down 8. I need to go on a heater, like, and it's like, wow, these are some bad shots getting forced up here, just trying to make something happen. Like let the offense work for you. And once you're going, then just go, you take it from there. Like I think that is the best case scenario for Minnesota. Like just, it's awesome. That is a skill that we need to compete for a championship. But just let it come about or more organically than it sometimes does. Don't force it. Like you can force it once it's there, but don't try to make something there that's not there.
Do you think that this is going to settle in a little bit more? Like they're going to find an offensive balance? I feel like for a month I've been saying like, I feel like they're like a couple small adjustments away from not the offense becoming elite, but like better than average, and it's been below average the whole season. And I get a game like this and I watch it back. I'm like, yeah, that's a good offensive team.
Yeah.
Like for 10 straight minutes,
right.
Like not a good play, a good sequence. Like, and then it just comes and goes. And I feel like the break is coming where it's going to be like 5-6 games in a row where they have that 120 offensive rating or whatever. It feels like that's close, but it just hasn't happened. And I don't know. I still feel like it's close. I like that they're looking for the advantage basketball more. They're running more pick and roll. There's more inclusion of Rudy. They're finding that more and more offense, but more and more often in the offense. But then it goes away at times. And it's maddening. I guess it's just like, it's just maddening.
I kind of go back to what Mike said, add to one question after the Orlando game, because I do think like a big part of the reason why it goes away is like there does get to be more ball holding and whatnot. And so you don't even know where possessions were supposed to go until like, because if Carl catches it up top, maybe he's holding it and now that's 8 seconds of the possession or it's just ending with the shot. Same thing can happen with Ant and like that just happens. It comes about and it comes back up, comes back up above the water and you're like, oh, there it is again. And so like, I think I asked Mike, like, how long does it take to like break these tendencies? Or do you think like these tendencies can just be broken where you can just trust that like the good offense, like the first quarter against Orlando and then the Houston game at large, especially in the second half, but can just be the norm? And he just kind of said, then he goes like, almost like winced. He's like, I wish we had more practice time.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to cement something in as like, this is what we do. Like frankly, pretty big changes in like how players approach the game in the middle of the season. Like I think you can have a practice, you can have a film session and it might pop it up for 3 games and it's like, yeah, here we go. But I think like it's hard to not have it revert to where like this was a big detail that we've been focusing on. And so guys it's constantly in their ear. They're thinking about it. And then like the second you go to try to patch another hole, that thing slips back down to like where your natural tendencies are. And that is one of the hard things where it's like, okay, this is slipping again. We got to recorrect. This is slipping again. We got to recorrect. I don't think it'll get to, frankly, right now, like this is just what they do every night. I think I don't know if they're going to get to that point this season. They might get there eventually and they can win with what they've been doing now. Like we've seen that. But I don't know if it'll get to like that peak optimal point of they are taking the max advantage of the talent they have because everybody's making good, smart, quick decisions. I don't know if that's going to happen on a night-to-night basis by the end of this year.
It's weird. Utah did that. Utah got to that point, right?
Mike basically mentioned that. Yeah. Like, and I mean, it was all about quick decisions. We were just like, everybody's making the quick, right decision off of each read, and that maximizes offense.
I'm pretty sure all 3 seasons, or for sure the 2 full ones that Mike was there, they were both top 5 on offense and defense in Utah. And I don't know. I don't necessarily feel like that Utah team was way better than this Wolves team. I kind of weirdly feel like I like this Wolves team in the playoffs more. The defense is, I guess they have more perimeter defenders. So maybe you could argue like the defense
they do, and
is
like
better.
top end scorers. I mean, like
Yeah.
they have at least as much as Utah did. I mean,
So it gives you like this reason to believe that this can be better than Utah, but it hasn't been. This season hasn't been better than that. But I guess that's what I'm getting at is like I feel like I can picture this team being the Utah team and better. Though, to be fair, we haven't seen that this season. The Wolves have been mediocre offensively the entire year. It wasn't like, oh, remember that month? Remember November? Like, nope. It's like 13th in offense, 18th in offense, 21st in offense. Like if you go month to month, there hasn't really been that stretch. And it's, as I've, thought more with the trade deadline and everything, and like, okay, is this really a contender? Is this a team that I think can go to like the Western Conference Finals or whatever? And the answer to, if that is yes, this is what it has to be. This part of the offensive thing needs to click in, and it doesn't need to be 100% of the minutes. It doesn't need to be 90% of it. It just can't be as come and go as
for games at a time.
Yeah,
where like there are some games where it's like there was never a good stretch of offense.
right. I don't know. That's why this is a really interesting team, and I think it's why, with again after the Orlando game, another like, okay, poor fourth quarter execution team, and I started thinking about that first playoff series, right? Whoever they get, and the 10 ESPN people like do their pick, right, forever or for the series, and I can just picture like 6 of the 10 of them picking whatever, like the Lakers to upset them, and what they will reference like the clutch offense and the late game stuff as a reason, and it's enough of a narrative and kind of a fair one that you go, that people will feel just in being able to pick the Wolves. And the question is going to be, come the end of the season, come the beginning of the postseason, is can they do this? Can that just be a narrative and not a truth about this team? And it's hard because it kind of is a truth right now, though I feel like it's close to be, I don't know, whatever that is. I feel like it's close to not being a truth too, if they just do a couple things a little bit differently. I'm really interested by this kind of was it 5 games left before the break? Like, can you roll here? Can you roll into this? And can I sit here at All-Star break and go, yeah, I do believe in this offense a little bit more. And when I think about the rest of the season in the playoffs, I do have that greater confidence. They need that. I feel like they need that. You talked about it after the Thunder game where you were like, they needed that mentally, they need this mentally. I feel like to sustain for 5 games, to believe and know that they can do it offensively.
Well, the last 2 games are against Portland, so good chance you got some kind of good vibes heading into it.
Yeah, I mean, and Chicago isn't going to be all that difficult, but
it's really going to be the Milwaukee and the Clippers game.
And the Clippers,
it's going to be those 2 games. Yep.
Yeah, like
so 2 road games against high-end teams. Yep.
And it's a 5-game road trip.
I'm not saying you have to win them either. Well, it's a 5-game road trip, but they will come home between the Bucks and Clippers games. So it's a 2-game road trip and a 3-game road trip.
Right. I more so mean it of just like 5 games in a row on the road. And to that end, you always are like, man, if you win 3 out of 5, that's great.
Yeah.
And like,
Yep.
And I think they probably will. There's just a kind of a difference in how they do it. Are those 3 wins against Chicago and twice against Portland?
Yeah.
And they kind of feel like this game, or do you against Milwaukee or against the Clippers, do you have a game like the Thunder game where you go, oh, okay, let's put that in this pile. There's been a couple of those. They need that pile to get, for me, I need that pile to get bigger to be more confident going into the playoffs of like, no, I'm not. This is stupid. Why are you taking the Lakers over the Wolves? You know, but at this point, there's enough that people point to where I can be like, yeah, I don't know, but that's a fair point. Like, that's where I'm at with it right now. I'm not gonna think it's that stupid that somebody picks, the 7 seed over the 2 seeded Wolves or whatever. but that can change. I think that's the biggest thing I want to have change in the last 30 whatever games of the season is just a greater confidence there.
Yeah, and people are going to be licensed to pick those types of things even more after last year when a 7 went to the West Finals and an 8 went to the NBA Finals. So like I think we'll see people will be more brave to do those things anyway, just because. So I agree with you. But yeah, I think offensively they had to find it, and they had to find it for long periods, long stretches. And it just really it comes down to, like Mike was like, I liked our effort offensively last night, which is just not what you think of at all. But it was like, he's like, it's hard cutting. It's being really intentional about your spacing. It's attention to detail and doing things hard. You can run whatever set you want. If it's not run hard with max effort, it's probably not going to work. He's like, I liked our, he's like, we're going to bring our effort defensively every night. We've seen that. He's like, but tonight I liked our effort offensively, which is so weird. It's like, you guys didn't try hard enough offensively. That's never the case. Never said about anything in the NBA.
But it's a like, different type of trying. It's a precision trying.
Yes,
it's not it's a trying to be precise, not a trying to.
It's being intentional. Like it's like it's thinking to cut and then it's cutting hard. It's all these types of things that just make offense so much better than like that. I think what he is saying is like doing those things. Spacing, cutting, all these types of things, it makes decision-making easy. Like we can talk about decision-making all we want. A lot of times the turnovers come in like, that was a bad decision, but you kind of were in a little bit of a pinch. Where like, if you are doing everything else correctly, now Carl it's an easy thing where like, I either have like the driving lane or it's very obvious where the help defender is coming in and where my pass should go. Right. So like, it isn't always like just become a super high IQ player. It's like, let's make easy decisions for everybody. So it's really hard to screw it up. Like that's how it's like repeatable every possession, getting the right thing and doing well and creating good offense like that. That's kind of it. Like make everybody's decisions easier.
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and what I'm going to do this week with Jace and Chris and Kyle, and I'll come up with something myself. We're each going to put together a slate for the Super Bowl for Sunday, and we'll see if any of the four of us get all of our picks correct.
I'm going to go with
Jace.
Patrick Mahomes over half a yard passing.
You are. That is a free script. We should say that again.
I think he's going to do it. That'll be my pick.
Okay. That's your one. You're just
no. I'll make one.
It is a free square, though. We should say that they're giving a free square. Is Mahomes going to throw for a yard in the game? So you take that, and then you kind of start building your slate from there. What else do you have, Jace?
Brock Purdy to throw an interception.
Okay, I like that. Let's see if I can find that. Okay, Brock. Yeah, that seems like a good one. Okay, what else we got?
I mean, he usually doesn't. Well, you just gave me to give one.
That's your only one?
I thought you wanted me to give one because you were going to make 4 out of everybody.
No. I wanted you to do 4. Do you have anything else, or you can think about it more? What do you like? Do you like a receiver?
Give me 1 second. You start poking around numbers. You just start showing what's available, and I'll pick something.
Well, we got receiving. We got Travis Kelce, 70.5. I wonder how much of a Taylor boost that got. Ayuk 63.5 receiving yards here. Rashee Rice at 67.5 receiving yards. Feels a little bit high there.
I would go Richie James under 5.5 receiving yards.
Richie James. Okay.
I mean, he had 6 against Miami. I think they won that game by quite a bit. He had 0 against Baltimore. I don't think he was even active for the Bills game. So.
You just pulled this one out of...
I don't think he's going to do it. I mean, totally for him is like, is he active or not? Because if he's not active, then they'll wipe it off the board. But if he is active and he runs 2 routes, then they will give you that as a win. And then rushing yards, Pacheco over 67.5. He gets that.
Like that was his number in the last.
He got 68 last game. And like San Fran's been run against in these playoffs, so like I feel like that's a pretty strong one.
Okay. All right. So that we'll make this Jace's slate here. You can be subject.
Yeah, I want the Mahomes one on mine.
Okay, well, everybody can take that. So that's just like a 4-leg. There's no amplifiers on that, but that if you did $20, that's to win $200. If you don't have a Prize Picks account and you want to check it out for the Super Bowl this coming Sunday, create an account at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. They'll give you a $100 sign up bonus if you use the promo code Dane, and there's the free Patrick Mahomes square. So this is kind of their way of being like, hey, come in. We'll give you one here that gives you some good odds. So if you're going to be watching the Super Bowl, consider checking this out. All right,
if you're going to be watching the Super Bowl,
yeah. Well,
if you're one of those people,
yeah, it is fun. It is fun though to have something on a Super Bowl game.
Yes,
and I'm not it's
yep.
like I'm not a big like just in general sports better, but I'll watch with a friend and I'll be like, okay, like I got the Chiefs plus 1.5. Like it just makes it's the one time a year where you're like, all right, I'm gonna do this.
Right.
Yeah.
It is harder to track something, I'm assuming, like Prize Picks when you're like at a Super Bowl party and like people are talking to you and you're going and getting food and stuff and you're like
Richard
James.
James.
Right. Honestly, it's like you're sitting in the fourth quarter. It's like I just need Richie James to not catch a single pass, and somebody's like, in the second quarter he caught a 12-yard pass.
Like, damn it.
Oh, I missed that one.
The last thing I want to get to here is your Conley Corner for this week. We pretty much, well, every time you do a Conley Corner, we come on and we talk about what you and Mike was the focus of that article that time. Can you, because I think this ties into what the meat of what this week's Conley Corner was. Can you just talk about like how this came to be and what Conley Corner is?
Yeah, so like last year, we would talk to Mike Conley all the time, and just like really good interviews. Like to me, it was always like we asked a lot of guys after the games, good, bad, whatever. Like, why did this work? Why didn't this work? And they have some answers and whatnot. A lot of times it's like, oh yeah, defensively we just like played really hard, whatever. Offensively we moved the ball. Like Mike is like sitting there and like you walk away from his being like, I feel like an NBA coach. Like I know so much about basketball. It's like like switching defenses was something they were terrible at last year, and sometimes they still struggle with it. And Mike is like, we need to do A, B, C, and D, and that's how you eventually break this down. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then the next time they play against it, you watch for it, and you feel like you've got a better grasp on the game. And it was like, you could talk to this guy about anything, and it's all like super interesting, insightful answers. And so that was kind of like the whole thing of like this offseason. I was like, what's something interesting I could do? It's like, I would love to talk to Mike Conley about anything, like twice a month or whatever. And the reason why I thought that would work is because he's always like thoughtful enough with his answers that I knew if he did the interview, I would have something to work with. And B, I knew that he would do it. Like, and the amount of people who would do this is such a small list of time who's taking 10 minutes out of after a practice once every 2 weeks. Doesn't sound like much, but like, it's hard to get like Ant to come over to talk after practice. Like
for
sometimes.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Yes. Right. And he's like, oh, I'm doing this and this. I talked after the game 2 days ago, whatever. Like sometimes
we're really popular. They love talking.
Sometimes they can be pulling teeth to just get him to come over and talk to us as a group. Mike, I was very confident would do this because he's just so like willing to share his thoughts and his time, and it's awesome. And it's just made covering the Wolves so much more, so much, I think, better. Just our coverage is better because we all have a firmer grasp of what's going on and what needs to change. Because he's so good at sharing all of that. So this week's was just like, Mike, why are you so good at the media? Why are you so good? And
why do you prioritize this?
Yeah. And just so giving of your time and everything. And he was like, like I found the relationship and like the value of the media and how that's kind of all encompassing for the whole league. And then he's even talked about like, he's like, I've been more private in a lot of areas of my life, but eventually I hit a point where I was like, it's not going to hurt anything if I'm sharing my insight with these people and whatnot. And I do think it also goes back to just like Mike Conley's a good dude who treats everybody the same. Doesn't like look down on us. I don't think in any way, shape, or form doesn't look down on anybody. If you walked past Mike Conley in the street and you were like, Mike Conley, he'd be like, hey. And if you asked him a question about basketball, he would have a conversation with you.
He would.
I am confident in that. It's just that has.
Now we just set Mike up for a lot of on the street conversations.
Yeah, don't do it. Maybe one question. Maybe save it to one question. Especially if it looks like he's busy and he's going somewhere, which he probably is. But yeah, that was the whole point of the whole interview, was just breaking down why are you like this with the media, because it's so rare. Like it's so rare that somebody is so like after a loss, Dane, so like shit hit the fan. Like Rudy throws a punch at Kyle. Who do we go talk to?
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, the Wolves blow a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Who do we go talk to?
Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like so many players, like Ant thinks he should talk after a game if he scored 25. He doesn't get like if he scored 17. He's like, I didn't do anything. Why do they want to talk to me? Like I didn't even have a good game. Mike understands that like I've talked about anything. Good, bad, ugly. And it's just so like not combative at all. Like there's never like a short answer. He's thoughtful. He's answering your questions, even if they're hard questions. He's talked about like, I know that I built up enough respectful relationships where like nobody's asking me gotcha questions. Nobody's trying to get me to say anything. And it's a two-way street. Like Mike gives us enough stuff no matter what. Like Mike just talking about basketball is interesting. There's no need to stir anything else up. But he is just like the shield for all of his teammates, and he always has been. Like I've heard about this, like when he was in Utah and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were, clearly strained relationship. And it was like, is Donovan Mitchell not even passing to Rudy Gobert? Like, those guys aren't necessarily talking after games. And Mike Conley's going up there and doing the interviews, like at the press conference table and whatnot. He's just always done that. He's been like the spokesman, and he handles it really well. And the fact that he's not really throwing guys under the bus, but he's not giving us absolutely nothing. He walks that line so well, I think. It's been easily the best person I've covered, just as far as like consistently giving access to himself and insight,
intellect. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I think that's the part to hammer home. It's not just that he will talk. It's the substance of what he talks about. And obviously, like you and I are doing a little bit of different things, right? And this being a perfect example is like you're trying to tell a story like through quotes. Sometimes I'm trying to like things I don't understand, like maybe an X's and O's type of thing. And with Mike, he's like willing. I feel like he's put together like, okay, Jace is trying to do this. Like he kind of has a feel for what we're each trying to get to. And it really, I think it helps us tell a more like accurate story about what's going on, whether it's a story about Mike or a story about the team. And it's like this, not that our stories or this podcast or anything are that big of a thing, not that many people like read it or listen to it.
Right.
But those interviews are taken and they're on YouTube and people are able to see all of that, or they're in John's stories and Chris's stories or national stories and all this sort of stuff. And having high quality answers that really answer the question, that form the story, present a more accurate story. And amongst all of us together, like we are, I think you put this in the story, like we're kind of the microphone, right? For these guys and being able to tell their story. So to have someone on the team that you can go to in those situations and get a sober answer of this is what it is, this isn't what it is. I mean, Mike's not the only player who's done that. Taj Gibson was really good with this for us.
Taj once said as we came over, he's like, why do you guys only ever come over after we lose? Because like, I was like, Taj, you're sitting in the chair. Everybody else is hiding in the shower.
Yeah. He goes, all right.
Yeah.
No, it's an interesting angle, and it's just like it's something I've just grown in appreciation for, like in media of this stuff matters. I think it's just tactically smart by Mike too. Like, I mean, let's be real. Like he's giving you 10, 15 minutes a week or whatever on this and being conscientious and whatever, giving you that time. That's developing a relationship with you that is going to lead you to not necessarily totally paint him in a better like Homery type light, but it is going to lead you to be more accurate with that. And you're not going to you're going to always have assume positive intent with Mike Conley, and I think it's a smart thing for all players to do, is to think about it in that sort of way. I think it does a ton for their Q score, because we're humans too, and the way in which we interact and receive and perceive these players, we're doing it through our own filters of our heads. And when it's presented to us in this sort of way, I just feel like I tell personally a more accurate story of whatever is going on with the Minnesota Timberwolves, because I can talk to Mike Conley about that. And I think that's a really, why, and kind of invaluable thing to have on your team, particularly when this is kind of a younger team. You know, your star player's 22 and he's great and funny in the media and all that, but he's not giving Mike Conley answers, you know, that really help us better understand what is going on. So yeah, I have a great appreciation for it too. I think it's an interesting element about this team. And I love these Conley Corner things, man. Like everybody look to them. It's a completely like unique content. These are just Jace and Mike one-on-one. So it's like, it's not something I have access to or anything else. Like you can only get this stuff from Jace.
It's just to give one more example, and like I keep using Ant's name, like Ant it's basically like 70% of NBA players. And like it's just like
Ant isn't rude to us.
No. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I am not trying to like. It's just here's a prime like. He is not the only player who doesn't want to come over after practice. He's not. I'm just like he's just always the first name that comes to my head. He's more like the norm than everybody else is, you know. Like,
for sure.
But like after the Orlando game, and this is 22-year-old flustered, you know, like you're asking him questions, and like kudos to him for just doing the availability. But 5 out of his 10 answers are I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It literally is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, like, and then you got Mike over there and he's like, we need to do this and this and this and this. If we do this, then we can get here. We're just struggling with this right now. And I think we'll get there. But it takes time and it takes this and everybody's got to accept this. And you're just like, oh, okay. You know, like, and maybe that's Anton when he's 36, you know, who knows? But here's the thing like about effort on offense. It was like effort issues. They're really associated with offense. And Mike goes, just to give you like one answer and like the depth of knowledge that he gives us. Yeah, it's kind of like that gift and a curse. We have such a talented team with guys who can go get a bucket at any point that you can get lazy. You can get complacent. You can just say, give me the ball and I'll go score it. And when you do that, your offense slows down. There's certain points when you're making shots and it looks good, and then you start missing them. And then nobody else is in a rhythm. Nobody else is in a good flow. So it requires everybody continuing to run, continuing to space. Like Rudy does it the best. Rim run and use his body to create attention and open up stuff for a lot of people. That's something we've got to continue to work on. It's just like, that's one answer, and he gave 10 answers like that. You know, like it is just like, oh, really insightful. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, I understand why.
And it matches what we're seeing.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
Like, and it's not like, oh yeah, that he's saying, yeah, that didn't work, but this is how it can work. And it has worked in the past. Here's an example. Rudy is an example of how it, you know.
Yep. So then you know what to watch for. So then you watch on offense and you're like, wow, yeah, Rudy does like, oh yeah, his rolling. Oh yeah, you do see how the roll without him even getting the ball, the roll sucked in that defender that opened up the corner 3.
Yep.
Like, and he didn't get the ball and he had nothing to do with it. You just look at the person who passed it and the person who shot it. And Rudy had a big impact on the play. Like those types of things. Then like when you listen to Mike and it's like, oh, okay. Right. And as far as like the media thing goes, like you talk about the bias, like as much as anything, like, and obviously we're taught like, you know, you try your best not to let anything like break down your objectivity in covering the game. Not even like, oh, I like Mike Conley more, so I'm going to frame him in a positive light. It's that if I'm hearing Mike Conley give all these answers all the time after every game, whose perspective is going to start to leak in and become like morph my perspective? Like I'm starting to see the game from Mike Conley's perspective because it's getting shared with me on such a deep level. So I'm seeing the game the exact same way he's seeing the game eventually. And that's going to frame like how I see everything. And so I think like the more open you are with and the more available you are, like the more your perspective is shared with the people who are covering you, that can only be a positive thing. It's like, yeah, but here is where they're coming from on this. I see what's happening. Here's kind of where they're thinking in that spot.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and it's and it's a balance. Like it doesn't need to be, and he does a ton of media stuff, and he does like radio hits, but he goes above and beyond. So we're not saying that this is the expectation.
He is the outlier. Yeah.
But you see the advantages of having done that. And I think, you know, if you guys are just like consumers of me and Jace's stuff and you go, you know, I think Dane and Jace have been doing some more smart content this year. That's why. I mean, this is a big part of the reason. And I think, again, particularly with what we were talking about before, a team that is like confusingly right there, but definitely not there offensively. I have such a better understanding of what they're trying to get to and what it will look like when it works because Mike Conley's explained that to me. And it's like, echoes, but in a different way of what Finch said to us too. And so
Right.
you kind of take, you go back and you read the transcripts after the game of what Finch said and what Mike said. And then, I'm sitting here to do a segment on why the fourth quarter offense didn't work. I took my notes during the game of why I thought it was. And now I got all these other different things that I've added in and maybe even taken as my own from something that Conley and Finch said. So I don't know. That's maybe a little inside baseball on the media side there. But I think, Mike Conley's a gem for those of us in the media. And I think that was a cool article that you dug into. These are about every other week. I think I was saying weekly.
Roughly every other. It's definitely every other is the goal. There are times where it goes every 3, just
if they're out of time
or whatever, right? But it's like every other for the most part. But yeah, it's been awesome. And like, I was a little worried that I would run out of stuff. And there are some times where I'm like, what should I do this week? Like, and then I'm like, is this even a good idea? But then Mike just talks. And it's literally, and I'm like, yeah, that worked out great. I didn't have anything, but I asked like one starter thing, and then all of a sudden it was easy to have a conversation. And like I just encourage, like, last night's isn't on there, but Timberwolves YouTube page, they've got all like the post game practice stuff, whatever. Like, go to another post game and just watch Mike, and like you'll probably learn more about basketball. Like, you'll get a deeper understanding of like the team and where it's at and what it needs to do, or what just in general, what's good basketball. Like, it's insightful.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. That one's not. I was gonna play some.
Right. He was the last one to talk, so I think the Timberwolves camera was out of there at that point.
I think it's probably up there for the Orlando game though, and he answered like 8. That's a perfect example. Answered like 8 questions in a row about late game offense.
Yeah, actually, the Mike one last night was Carl talked at the exact same time. So
that's why there was two different ones there. But yeah, no, it's just you want to learn more about basketball, you want to learn more about the Timberwolves, listen to Mike Conley, whether that's us there in the locker room or people at home. I really recommend that, and obviously recommend checking out these Conley corners from Jace at the Pioneer Press. That's all I got for today, Jace. I appreciate you doing it.
Thanks, man. Always a good time.
Next up, I'm heading to Chicago for the game against the Bulls on Tuesday. And Chris Hine and I will record off of that game on Wednesday morning. And then I don't really know what's going to happen the rest of the week. It's trade. Have you decided, are you going to come to Milwaukee?
I don't know.
Based on the trade deadline?
It does. Matters a lot.
Yeah. So we'll see. This will be kind of one of those weeks where I'm part because I'm traveling and part because it's the trade deadline. We'll try to get stuff in where we can. And, if they trade for somebody and there's not a podcast up within 5 hours, it might be because I'm literally in the car driving to Milwaukee or something like that. So that's what's coming this week. Next up will be Chris and I, and then I think then we got kind of the trade deadline after that, something there, and I'm excited to watch the Milwaukee game on the night of the trade deadline. So we'll see if the roster's changed at all. We'll see how they fare again against a bigger team that can match up physically with the Wolves. That's just one of those things, for a month, 6 weeks now, I've kind of had in my mind of like, is this a weakness? Can they overcome that? Milwaukee will be the next challenge there. So coming up, that's what's coming up this week. Again, he's Jace Frederick. You're following him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. You're reading him in the Pioneer Press. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until Wednesday with Chris, he's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.